presentation with Ray McSoley, who is going to talk about dogs. And Ray has been working with dogs since 1974. In 1984, he started the animal behavioral or the dog behavioral department at Angel Animal Hospital in Boston, and wrote his first book in 1988. That apparently took him all over the world. So he's here to talk about that and many other things tonight. Please give a warm welcome to Ray McSoley.
Thank you, Helen.
Yep, thank you.
And thank you, each and every one of you, for coming. All right? I don't want to stand up and preach. I'd like you to think tonight that I'm sitting at your kitchen table across from you and we're talking dogs. So the fake thing is we're going to make it that you have aggressive dogs, okay? So to start off, I say, well, what do you have? Well, I have a 4-year-old German Shepherd and doesn't get along with other dogs, lunges when I'm walking him, and I say, all right. And we've had 3 trainers, and he bit the first trainer, so the trainer didn't come back. And then the other 2 said that he's aggressive because he's fearful. So I say to them, I have a question for you. Fundamentally, what's aggression about? And then they say fear. No, that's a form of aggression. Or you could call it a trigger. Territoriality, protection, dominance, all those are triggers. But it's not the fundamental reason behind aggression. And it doesn't make any difference how many legs it is. 4 legs, 2 legs. Aggression fundamentally is about control. Make sense? All right, now, in the dog-owner relationship, both can't be in control. Why? Well, because he's a dog, for one thing. But see, the human can relate on what I would call 2 levels. We can relate on a horizontal level. Girlfriend, fishing partner, maybe a golfing buddy, all right? It's pretty equal. God never put that chip in the brain of the dog. A dog has 0 understanding of equality, the buddy system. It's just not there. So the other type of relationship is vertical, boss, staff, professor, student, okay? That's what the dog understands. If we don't take the basic responsibility as dog owners to achieve a leader-follower role with the dog, the chances are, in most cases, we're heading down a rocky path and we're going to have some problems. Why? Because if we put the dog in the leader role, then he's going to do things as a leader that we're not going to like, all right? And see, if we don't take that leader role, then we force the dog to take it. Even if he's uncomfortable in doing so, he may be wary, he may be fearful, he may be stressed, all right? But we've pushed him into that position. So far, right? All right. Now, where do we go from here? There are 2 things that I have to get from a client's dog when I work with it. One is trust and one is respect. So Which one do you think I need to get first?
Respect.
Huh?
Respect.
Respect?
I was going to say trust.
Trust? Okay. How do I get it with that aggressive shepherd? Don't know? I don't either. So I don't place a great emphasis on establishing trust with a dog. Why? Because I'm not going to be able to do it in a very short time. And 99% of my clients don't want me coming over to their house 3 mornings a week, sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee, waiting for Oscar over there in the corner after maybe a month to decide, I think maybe this guy's okay. I think maybe I'll trust him a little bit. So, next question. Heel, sit, down, stay, come. What do we call those? Commands, right? That's what almost everybody calls them. Now let's say that I go up to Concord tomorrow night to have dinner with my daughter, and as in the past, let's say they're not 19, but the twins are between 3 and 4. So we'll sit there, and after dinner, Kristen says, come on, okay, kids, 7 o'clock, time to get ready for bed, so go in and brush your teeth. So I hear them brushing their teeth. I'm not going to say to Kristen, hey, Chris, what a great job you've done teaching the twins the command to brush their teeth. So it's not a command, right? What is it? I know, this is the last thing you expected, to sit here and get asked a bunch of questions.
A request?
It's stronger than a request. It's firmer.
Expectation? Direction?
A task. It's a task. When the twins complete the task, they get rewarded. They feel better about themselves. As shrinks tell us, they feel more secure, safer, all that, right? Under Kristen and Van's parenting, when you ask a dog to sit, think of it as a task. It's not a big task, it's a little bitty task, but it's a task nonetheless. And that's very different from a command. I mean, moons ago, when I was in the Marines, I learned what a command was very fast, all right? So it's really a task. When the dog completes the sit, it gets rewarded, it succeeds, feels better about itself, feels safer, more secure, under what? Under your coaching, guidance, leadership, chairman of the board, however you want to view that relationship. Now, I'll have clients and they say, I'll ask them, well, how much training have you done? Well, we took them to school and we taught them to sit and we taught them to lie down. I said, no, you didn't. Oh, yeah, we did. No, I said, no, think. The dog has been sitting since he was 4 weeks old. He's been lying down since he was born. So we don't teach them that. What we do is we associate some cue with the behavior that the dog already knows. Now, there's one task about which the dog has zero knowledge. You know which one that is? Heel, sit, stay, down, come.
Stay.
Now, sometimes they stay when the other members of the litter are running around. Healing. 9 out of 10 dogs in this country never learn how to heal. And that, in my mind, is the most critical task that a dog needs to learn. Healing. If I can get that shepherd to heal, whichever side they want it on, right side, left side, so that he can walk next to me with a slack lead past other dogs, then guess what? He's looking up to me as being in the leader, and he understands it's no longer his responsibility to go after that dog. It's whoever's healing him. It's that person's responsibility. He understands that as a dog, his responsibility is to be responsible, in this case, to me. Okay? Now, I start with a British slip lead. This one happens to be made by Mendota. And dogs and horses are both what we could call into pressure animals. Have you ever heard that phrase? All right. Hold that kind of tight, okay? What does that mean? Into pressure means this: any sustained pressure in one direction, guess what? Excites the opposition reflex and pushes the dog in the opposite direction. So the harder I pull this way, the harder the dog pulls into the pressure. So when we work on healing, guess what? We never want to have any sustained pressure on the lead. Now, there's another reflex. Thank you. If the client, let's say the husband, comes up to me and he's standing in front of me, and he takes two fingers and snaps me right here in the front of my neck, do I move my head forward or backwards? Backwards, right? Why? To escape that uncomfortable sensation. And is it a function of intellectual? No, it's not. It's a reflex. It's the avoidance reflex. It's the avoidance reflex that we want to try to excite in the dog. There was an old cowboy horse trainer by the name of Ray Hunt. Ray passed, I think, either 2006 or 2008, and he would have been or was what the media would call a horse gentler, horse whisperer. You know? And Ray gave clinics for 60 years. One of the things that he used to tell his students was, remember, when you're working your horse, make the wrong thing hard and the right thing easy. All right? Listen, if you don't remember a single thing I said this evening, remember that line from Ray. Make the wrong thing difficult, the right thing easy. So, I'll take the lead, put it on the dog, and start off with whatever word the client wants to use and whichever side they want the dog to heel on, all right? So now he goes out in front. What I'm going to do is take the lead and snap it as quickly as I can to mime this. Now, if I do it right, I should get a stop from him or her and looking back. Now that dog sees that they're in front of me and so now the dog comes back. I tell him, hey, as a boy, let's go out again. And he does it again. And I do the same thing. Or with some dogs, if he's on the left side, I may take a right turn. And when I get about halfway into the turn and he's going that way, I'll snap very quickly this way. How quick does the snap need to be? Well, how quick is this one? The snap ends on my neck, and then I move my head backwards.
Are you using a slip knot I mean, that gets tighter as you pull?
It's
Is that
cotton.
an important thing?
You know? I mean, I could do it on her wrist and it can't hurt. Chain can,
So it, so.
prong
you're
collar can.
Showing us that, because you want us to use a slip knot.
I do,
So you do.
yeah. Yeah, I don't. I want to get the healing down as quickly as I can. Okay? I don't. Now, the other thing is this. Here, if you would. So let's say that I snap it, but I don't snap it well, and then I kind of pull a little bit, and the dog turns. Okay, think about this for a minute. Whose decision was it to turn? Was it the dog's, or was it mine? Again, quick snap and then a pull. And now the dog turns. Whose decision was it to turn? It was mine, exactly. You don't want it to be yours. You want it to be the dog's choice. Does that make sense? Because when it's the dog's choice, that's infinitely more effective than if it's my choice. I was with a client, thank you, about 3 weeks ago. They have a nice dog, part shepherd, part, I don't know, Mexican hairless. I don't know what the DNA said. Anyway, he's very wary. And you can pat him if you just ignore him when you come in and you sit down. Maybe after 10 minutes, he may come over. If he does, you could pat him, not on the head, but say under here. And you could do that for maybe under 10 seconds. If you go over that, then he snaps. Now, he hasn't bitten, but he snaps. Okay? So, her brother came over, he's a big guy, and she was telling them that he's been snapping at her a lot. So, and they've been using treats. So he said, give me some treats. So she gave them to him, and so he goes, the dog gets up and comes to him for the treat, and he goes like that, and the dog goes to take it, and he jerks it back from the dog, all right? And then he does it again, all right? And the dog goes for it, he jerks it back. And then he brought his hand up. Right? He did this either 3 or 4 times. Now he brings his hand up, the dog jumps up and nails him on the wrist. Okay? What did he do? He said up here, I'm going to be the boss. So what did he do? He totally negated what communication the dog's giving him, okay? And says, I'm going to be the boss here. He went to war with the dog. And the dog went to war with him, and then he lost. And I see that a lot. I see that in some dogs that, they're with owners, and the owners will say, gee, you know, I mean, he's a nice dog, but he fights me. He does things exactly what he wants to do. You know, he's really difficult. And we've had a couple of trainers, and both the trainers said, I'll tell you exactly what he is. He's stubborn. And I said, you've got to be really, really careful when you think about your dog as being stubborn. Because what does the human think? The human says, oh, okay, Joe, the trainer, said, I've got a stubborn dog. So that means, I guess, I have to be over stubborn than the dog. I have to out-stubborn the dog. Now we go to work again. We go to war. About a year ago, I was with a client, and she was fostering a 60-pound, I don't know, good-sized dog. And she was fostering him to eventually, have him taken by some new owner. And so I walked in. I happened to have Judy with me that morning. And so the woman's holding the dog back, and he's growling and he's showing his teeth. So we sat down, and I got out my pad, and I'm writing down some information on the dog. And he's over there, and Judy was saying to me a couple days ago, we were talking about this, and she said, that dog never stopped growling. I mean, I don't know how he could breathe and growl at the same time, but he never stopped. So I finally said to the client, I said, just do me a favor, just drop the lead. She said, I think he'll bite. I said, nah, just drop the lead, all right? So she drops the lead, and so I got up and I walked around, and he growled, and so I eventually worked my way over. And I just picked up the end of the lead. I just held it not tight. I said, Max, let's you and I go for a walk, okay? So we started. And I'm not going for a walk with you, all right? So I just like this, just very quick snaps, all right? But I kept walking. And eventually he stays back here, right? Which is fine. I turned, walked back, and I just did this around the kitchen and the dining and the living room for 10 minutes maybe. Guess what? He's walking right here. I'd make my turn, he'd make turn with me. No more snaps on the lead. I said, okay, I'll give you a break. So we gave him a break for about 10 minutes, and I said, okay, now we're going out in the backyard to do some. So I did some. Judy came with me. Gave the lead to Judy. I said, here, you heel him. Boom, 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 all around the yard, right there. And when I first got in, she said, I'm afraid I can't keep him as a foster. I'm going to have to return him to the rescue group. Guess what? She wound up adopting him. And he's great. Now, what I did was what I call quiet firmness. Achieving a leader role is not about being alpha. It's not about being dominant with the dog. I've done that stuff many years ago, and it didn't end well in most cases. And I've got a lot of scar tissue to prove it. So why did I do it? Because that's what I learned from old trainers, that you have to dominate the dog. But it's not true. And I don't care how tough the dog is, you don't need to dominate the dog, but you do need to establish a leader role. See, most people will say, when I ask about respect and trust, they'll say trust. And we'll talk about that, and I'll say, all right, here's the thing. We're going to go out and we're going to do some healing. And they watch and they say, how'd you do that? And then sometimes I'll let my dog out. I'll have them hold Coda, and I'll heel the dog back and forth that they couldn't do. They're on one side of the street, the dog's on the other, the other dog is on the other, and their dog's pulling into the street to get to the dog. And I might be able to get them that close. Sometimes get them to meet in the first session. Why? Because I'm firm, but not rough. And there's an enormous difference there. Now, what I'm working for is gaining his or her respect. When I start to get the respect, I'm going to start getting response. The dog's going to start turning with me and focusing on me. Remember, what's the prerequisite of all learning? Is proper focus. If I was a history teacher at Boston College High, and I've got 15 boys in the class, 14 are focused on me, the 15th one is looking out the window, watching the girls go by. If I can't get him to refocus onto me, guess what? I can teach, he can't learn. Why? Because he's not focused on me. If your dog is out in front and you're yanking on the lead, guess what? He's not focusing on you. That snap can change everything if you do it properly. And you make your turn. Start to make your turn. Quick snap. Turn. Hey, that'll boy. All right. You make it fun for the dog, but you make it firm. 10 years ago, I was asked to come over to England, to the Isle of Wight, to work with two former Antiguan street dogs. John and Kim have a summer home down there. And so she went to wasn't even a shelter, but you know, it's a holding place. And she saw these two 5-month-old Antiguan street dogs, and she tells John, we have to rescue these dogs. So they bring them back to England, and for 2 months, they're perfect. And then, when they hit 7 months, they started to have little dust-ups. But John is a big guy and a former British SAS, so he'd break up the fights. But the fights got worse. The fights became bloodletting affairs, overnight trips to the vet, so they separated both dogs. They have a huge home there, a lot of rooms, so George and Zook each had a separate room. And then he built a huge enclosure, he called it a pen, enclosure out in one of the yards. They've got 13 acres there. So in the morning, they'd put one of the dogs in the enclosure, and they'd let the other dog run loose. And then the next time, then they'd switch. So dogs got plenty of exercise. And when they were 9 months, they had a renowned behaviorist come down from London, and she started working with one of the dogs, and it got away from her and attacked the other one. They had the worst fight they ever were in. John broke up the fight, but John wound up in the hospital, and George wound up with something like 26 stitches here. They almost lost him. She tells them, you'll never get these dogs together. You'll have to get rid of one of them. So, you know, after that many months, that's hard, you know? Which one? So Kim happened to be having lunch with this Barbara Tarlow, who was a client of mine in Dorset, England, back in 1990, and she said, why don't you contact our guy? So I wound up going over there. I started on day 1 on healing. Couldn't get both dogs anywhere near each other, but one dog at a time. And Becky is the dog walker, and she helped. I showed her how I do the healing. And my cell phone? Yeah, if you got it. I was lamenting for 3 days that I didn't bring a camera to take some photos. On the 4th day, it dawned on me, thank you, I've been carrying the camera around in my hip pocket for 3 days. So anyway, by the 6th day, I'll show some quick shots here if I can. Judy, you're going to have to get after me to delete some photos. But this was a classic case. This is day 6. This is Becky, the dog walker, and the woman on the right is Kim, and that's George and Zook,
Side by side.
side by side.
Wow, best buds.
Yeah. On the 6th day, you said?
Huh?
They're best buddies now.
Anyone's coming.
Next to each other.
Yeah.
Next to each other.
No, hold it up so you can get it on the camera.
Oh, you want it up here? Oh, sorry.
You don't have to get that close. Okay. Now. Is there another picture? That's it. I'm all set.
So the morning of the 8th day, John, who, as I said, was, in the SOS, and so Judy, thank you. So John found out that I was in the Marines, so he used to make tea for us about 5:15 in the morning. So the morning of the 8th day, we're having tea, and the sun really hadn't come up yet. And so he says to me, Ray, you've made really great progress with the dogs, but he said, I know you're planning on leaving tomorrow evening, but is there a chance we could get both dogs together? And I said, you mean loose? And I said, geez, I don't know, John, He said, you may have to spend some more time here. I said, well, that'd be hard. So maybe a few minutes later, I said, you know what? Look, the sun's coming up. It's going to be a great morning. Why don't we just let the dogs out? And he looks at me, he says, like right now? I said, yeah, right now. So we opened one door to one room and the other one, and John opened the big French doors. Boom, the dogs are gone, out of sight, boom. So I'm talking to John, and I see every once in a while he looks down at his watch, and I'm trying to get his mind off the dogs. He finally says, so, Ray, the dogs have been gone for 40 minutes. Do you think they're all right? And I said, I don't know. I hope so. So maybe 5 minutes later, both dogs show up, tongues down to here, all right? So we let them in, and this is George and Zook on a huge beanbag bed about that big.
And you are.
4 or 5 minutes after that picture was taken, they were both sound asleep
Wow.
on a beanbag.
And it all comes from teaching them how to heal
They haven't fought.
individually.
It's 10 years. They've never fought since. So I was giving a talk just before COVID to a couple of dozen trainers, and I showed them I did the whole thing. There's a whole bunch of pictures here of them. I did the whole thing. And a young fellow stood up and he said, So, Ray, I have a question. So, how did you solve the problem? I said, healing. He said, yeah, you told us that, but what else? What else did you do? I said, healing. He said, he started again. I said, wait a minute here. Who's the one that's hard of hearing? I say healing, you're not hearing it. Healing. He said, is that all? I said, never think of healing as that all there is. But it's the foundation for establishing a solid, positive relationship between you and your dog. When I brought Coda home, when I adopted him, I left Acton, Maine at 8 in the morning. By the time I got back, it was about 11. And he spent the 3 hours jumping from the front seat to the back seat and howling all the way. So I brought him in the house. I let him just get used to it for a little bit. 11, 12, 1, 2, I took him out and I started healing with him. That first day, now he's between 2 and 3 years of age, all right? But when I take him out now, if I take the lead off, I tell him heel, he's right there. I don't care. Dogs, he'll pass, walk. Well, he had a little mistake a few days ago, all right? But outside of that, if I tell him, hey, heel, he'll walk right by other dogs that close. He's fine. And we've got a really good relationship working here. I've worked on other things, since then. But other things get much easier if the dog understands healing. It's a strange thing, I admit it, but the couple in England weren't certainly nowhere near the only clients I've had with dog-dog aggression issues. And I always start with healing. If it's an aggression problem with people, same thing, healing. And I am a bear on healing. And I'm firm, but I'm not rough. And it's not helpful to go to war with your dog, and too many times that's what happens. I had a client, he says, this another shepherd, would lunge at dogs and some people on the lead. And so when I got there, we talked for a bit, and his wife, he wasn't home yet, and I worked with a dog with his wife, and actually was one where I had Finn. I still had my older lad with me, and at the end, she was walking her shepherd about that close to Finn, walking right, slack lead. And we come inside, maybe 15 or 20 minutes later, the husband comes in, and so she started to introduce him to me, and he walks by and says, yeah, okay, yeah. And so with this, implant, mechanical things that's really loud to me. So I hear ice going in the glass, and then blah, 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 blah. So he comes out with, I don't know, his bourbon or his scotch, and he says, I said, Ray, oh yeah, Ray, I don't have a problem with the dog. She has the problem with the dog. I said, so he doesn't lunge at other dogs and sometimes people? Well, he said, you don't understand. He said, I wrap the lead nice and tight around my hand. I have good control. I just walk right by. I said, well, this thing plays funny games sometimes with some words, but did I hear the word control there? He said, yeah. He said, I have good control. I just have the dog wrapped up really shortly, We go right by the other dog. I said, you really don't have good control. You have no control. I said, what you're confusing control with is restraint. You have great restraint, you're a big guy, but zero control. So he looks at me and he sits down and he leans close and he says, Ray, I love this dog, but I get frustrated. And I said, well, you know, frustration's low-level anger. And he goes, oh. And he says, I don't get frustrated. I get agitated.
He didn't want to be angry.
I burst out laughing and he said, low-level anger, huh? I said, yes. And I said, when you get to that point, you're done. You're toast. You've gone to work. You've gone to war with them. There are better ways. And I happened to take a video of his wife walking the dog. And he looks at it and he says, how'd you do that? And I said, magic. But the human thinks too many times, I have to be tough with the dog. But the truth is you don't. What we fail to do most of the time is we don't read the dog. We don't pay attention to what the dog is telling us. And a dog, he's over in the corner, he's growling at me, all right? So I got up after a while. It took 20 minutes for the woman to let go of the lead. I finally got up, I put stuff back in my briefcase. I'm out of here. And she said, you're not? I said, yes, I'm leaving. I said, because you're 12 feet away, you won't let the dog loose on a lead. And I said, so he and I have to get to know each other. I can't do it with him there and me here. And she says, okay, I dropped the lead. So I have my hand, I'm at the kitchen table, and I have my hand on my knee under the table. Usually I'll get a cold nose here after a bit. No cold nose. I said, Lorraine, yes, is your foot over the lead? And she goes, I said, that's it, I'm out of here. She said, no, I dropped the, no, I let the lead go. So he goes over in the corner and the dog quiets down after a while, but then I got up. So what is he saying to me? I finally got comfortable with you sitting, but now you've gotten up and you're starting to move towards the window, but you're starting to get a little closer to me. And I'm telling you, I'm uncomfortable about this. Don't come closer. I just ignored him. I went to the window and I started looking. It was February, and there were a bunch of ducks out there. And I said, geez, it must be about 10 or 12 buffleheads out there. And she says to me, can you hear Max? I said, yeah. He's growling. I said, yeah, I know. She said, what are you going to do? She says, are you going to do something about it? I said, I am. She said, what are you doing? I said, I'm ignoring it. I said to her, so what would you have me do? Would you have me go over and stick my finger in his face and say, hey, listen, I'm in charge here? I said, that's going to really help build a relationship. That dog and me were like that. Not long, I think by end of the second session. And he's got a great heart, but that's one of the very, very, very few I have not made significant progress with. And they cannot get it out of their mind that he isn't by nature a biter. He's not. Now, there are three things in my humble opinion that are responsible for a dog's behavior. One would be the survival instinct. We see that in a lot of street dogs, okay? Second would be hierarchy. Talked about that. Hierarchy is critical. Now there's one more. How many of you are familiar with the Chinese word qi? Refers to your person's inner energy, right? All right. Most people have no idea how strong that is. Your energy affects your dog's energy, and that energy affects his behavior. If you're stressed, angry, frustrated, that's negative energy, and your dog's picked that up that fast. I have clients and they say, well, you know, he makes me nervous when I feed him because he might go for me. And they're setting him up. That guy's setting him up. Why? Because his energy is being transferred directly to the dog and it's negative. And whenever you get really loud or really, that's negative energy. It's not helpful. It's a way old cowboys used to break colts, through fear, intimidation, and force. Can you get the job done that way? Yes. But as Ray Hunt proved, it's not the best way. The best way is, yeah, be firm, but not loud, don't go to war. When you're working with a dog and you're working on something and the dog doesn't know it, let's say it's some behavior that you want ended. When you start working on that, there's always some pressure involved. Not physical pressure, but psychological, emotional pressure. Because you're working on stuff. Now, that pressure can come in one of three ways. All the pressure on the dog, all the pressure on the human, or mixed. Some on the dog, some on the owner. So, which should it be? Where should the pressure be? On the dog, on the human, or half and half? Huh?
Half and half.
Half and half.
I would say human.
Human. Nobody else cares.
No, I don't know.
All right. Give me a synonym for pressure.
Force?
Stress.
No, stress.
See, when I work with somebody's dog, I can't afford to have that much pressure on me. Why? Because that's stress. And that's negative energy, and guaranteed that dog has picked that up that fast, and he doesn't want me working anywhere near him. When my book came, my first book in '88, and Warner Books sent me around to some places, and one of them was New York City, and the Good Day Show, Good Morning Show, whatever. And the woman's interviewing me, and she says, "So, I read in your book where you work with aggressive dogs." I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I can't imagine how you do that. You must wear gloves." I said, "No, I don't wear gloves." And she said, "Well, why don't you wear gloves?" I said, "Well, you need to understand something. You see, psychologically, as soon as I put the glove on, I'm bitten. Right? Why? Because I'm anticipating I'm going to get attacked by the dog. Now, the mind is a wish-fulfilling tree. What you wish for, you get. So, no, I don't wear gloves." And then she says, "Oh, so Ray, have you ever been bitten?" And I said, "Yes, I have." And so she winces for the audience, she goes, "Ooh." And then she says, "So Ray, were any of them bad bites?" And I looked at her and I said, hell, lady, none of them were good. There is no such thing as a good fight. All right? Now, so when I work with a dog, I own someone else's, and there's some pressure there. I want all the pressure on the dog. But I want to set the dynamic so that the second that he starts doing what I'd like him to do, that pressure starts to go away. Eventually, he starts doing what I want with greater and greater consistency, and guess what? Eventually, there's no pressure at all. Okay? But you never want pressure on yourself.
The pressure that you're referring to is,
Inner energy. Chi. C-H-I. Chi.
oh, I misunderstood.
Okay?
We are so.
It's, you know, it's like the husband and wife that are going home after a party. And she says, hey, did you meet Ray McSoley? Yeah, he says. And she says, what'd you think of him? I don't know, seemed fine to me. Why? I don't know, she said. But every time that man got within this close to me, I had to back up. I was getting bad vibes from him. That's energy, right? Absolutely. So the energy is a huge factor in working with dogs.
So you're
Enormous.
saying that chi is like if you're quiet within yourself and more,
Look it up.
no, I know what chi is, but you're using it in a different way than I am expecting, so I'm trying to understand your meaning of it.
Pardon?
I was trying to understand your meaning of it, because I know what chi is, but I think of it the way that you're describing it, so I'm trying to understand your
Well, it
approach
takes
to
different forms. The martial artist that breaks boards, that's a physical aspect of chi, okay? To the viewer, anyway. Meditation is another aspect of chi. But it's working all the time. I mean, your chi is your breath. If you stop breathing, it's not long before they're kicking dirt over you. That's just one aspect. That's one aspect of how critical chi is. The dogs, the animals are very conscious of it, of energy. Why? Because it helps them survive. The human, probably eons ago, had a very highly developed sense of energy. But over the centuries and stuff, no. You know, we lost a lot of our senses. You know? But the chi is there. Yes?
But what about, like, if we already have relationships with our dogs and they already know that we're an anxious person, and they already know how we respond to their bad behavior that we don't like. Like, is it possible for them to, like, they already know us, right? So how can we train them out of our, what they already know our chi to be?
How do I what?
How will they accept us for, you know, what, but they know what our chi already is. They already know that we're anxious and that we get anxious when they're, when they act like this.
What
When
kind
they
of a dog?
misbehave, you know? But surprisingly, he's an 8-pound Shih Tzu.
All right.
But he was a singleton. He was born via C-section at Angel, and I know that attributes to his.
How old?
Well, now he's going to be, now he'll be 9 next month.
Okay, so he's got some age on him.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Issues.
Mm-hmm. Issues. And he's got a mom with major chi anxiety. And he knows that.
Help me out here, Judy. What? I missed that.
Has a mom with major chi energy.
Oh, he does?
No. He knows.
Oh.
So he was.
She's got major.
I've got
chi
major
energy.
anxiety. Okay, so my chi is like super chi. I don't know. It's like
Bad energy.
And it's
I've got anxious energy. I'm very type A, and I love him, and because he was C-section, we have been with him since he was hours old, right? And so he was.
so. Give me some examples of where your energy, I'm presuming here, has some kind of a negative effect on him.
I mean, there was no sign of any issue until he was, until we actually got another dog who I think he started feeling he was almost like maybe protective for, like another small dog. So he always lived with his mom and his dad, and we didn't know his mom was pregnant, and that the next thing we knew, she was having contractions and we were having a C-section angel. And so he was brought up as this only child, and he never learned how to share. He never learned how to live in a litter. He didn't have any litter mates. So because of that, he had been totally fine from the beginning, and then he was about a year and a half old, and we got him. We got a fourth dog, another little teacup Shih Tzu. And we were actually at Cat Rock Park right here in Weston, and we were just doing a normal walk, and out of the blue, after he was almost a year and a half old, he lost it on another dog. And of course, reflexes, he's 8 pounds. I pick him up. My anxiety, I'm like, what?
So you reinforce the behavior.
No, absolutely. I know it's my fault. I'm just not sure, have I already,
How much does he weigh?
8 pounds.
8?
Mm-hmm.
You can still do some healing with him.
Okay, so we've tried some training, and like you said, I know it's, we haven't done the
Now.
healing, but.
When you've worked with your dog, has a lot of it been food-based?
Like treats.
Yes.
All right. Here's something to remember, and it's important. Let's say that you have a 5-month-old German Shorthair, and I have a litter mate. And we're both working our dogs on getting them to understand down. Not get off the counter, but lie down. You're using food, I'm not. The chances are very high that your dog is going to start responding faster to the down than mine. But there's a caveat there, and the caveat is this. As long as you're using food as the basis for reinforcement, you will never achieve a leader role with your dog. Why? Because he's not doing it for you. He's doing it for the food. I have clients, and I say, well, how is he? How much training? Well, we worked on set. And I said, was food involved? Oh, yeah. I mean, he's perfect. If we have the food treat, he's, boom, right. I said, what if you don't have? That's iffy. He may, but then again, he may not. Huh? So you've got a dog that doesn't sit. Unless he has food. I rest my case. And it's getting late, so.
So how do you train yourself to project the good energy?
That's, I don't know.
That seems harder.
That
Seems harder than training the dog. Because I get anxious when I see the other dog across the street.
I have a gift. There's no, well, we all have different gifts from up there, right? I happened to find mine a long time ago. But I do have a gift. And part of it is that emergency situations, for example, I'm very comfortable in them. I don't panic, you know.
Right. I've
And
got a big panic button.
And that's something if you really have to work on. I'll tell you what I needed to work on for years was my patience. It was very short when I'd worked with dogs initially. But when I started working with other people's dogs, one thing I knew was, listen, you're not going to be able to get rough with somebody's dog because they don't want you to come back, all right? So little by little, I had to work on patience. And also developing respect, true respect for the dog. And I'm there. Everything that I do with Coda, for example, is based on mutual trust and respect. The trust comes later, remember. The respect is more important in the beginning. You need the respect. I'll mention discipline sometimes, and people start right out thinking, oh boy, all right? I know what he's talking about. He's talking about punishment. I'm not talking about punishment. I'm talking about the opposite, positive discipline. When your dog learns that, and healing, for example, that way, that's discipline. But when your dog is really trained well, then there should be really no reason to go after him with punishment. You should just be able to say, hey, knock it off. And he says, okay, good, understand. But it takes, as I talked about in my book, it takes some work. This is not only working with your dog, it's working on you as well. I had somebody very, very, very famous spiritually say to me a couple of years ago, your work is not yet finished. So I'm still working at it. I learn something from every single dog I work with, and that's the truth. Every single dog, I learned something that I didn't know. And the work gets easier now, but the work for years was hard, really, truly hard work. And I went to the dogs to learn. I told them, I said, you know, you be my teachers. And they were, and they're hard taskmasters. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. But they were very subtle in a lot of their messages, but we don't get it, see? You know? One more quick story and then boom. And a guy, he's in my book, Tony, with a Rottweiler, great dog. And he said to me, he's got one problem, Ray. He said, we've been working on down. He said, I had a trainer, he bit the trainer said, he's a psycho dog and wouldn't come back. And so he said, I work with him every evening when I get home. And he said, he sits and I tell him down. And he'll get a little growl out of him. So now I tell him again, down. And the teeth come out. And he said, a trainer told me you can't let a dog get away with that. So he said, now I get firmer. I tell him, down, bang. Now he bites. So I took him outside and I did about 10 minutes of healing with him. Very light, quick snaps. 130-pound dog, I don't want him hanging off my arm, all right? So we came back, he's a superintendent on the big dig, so we're working in the trailer. So we get back in the trailer, and I had this regular lead on him, and I put it under my boot so that there was about that much distance to his neck. So his head, he was standing, but his head was tilted down about that much. And then, so I'm talking to Tony, and he said, "What's going on with Maxie?" I said, "Well, we're just getting to know each other a little bit." Then I feel no more pressure, so I look, and he dropped his head a little bit. So I just picked up that slack. 22 minutes later, he lies down. I said, "That's what I want you to work on this week. I see you next week?" He said, "Yep." He said, "What do I tell him?" I said, "Don't say anything to him. Put the pressure on the dog. Let him figure out, how can I get this uncomfortable sensation away from me?" Lies down, pressure goes away. Ooh, what a smart dog I am, right? So I go back the next week, I tell him now, I said, "Now we're going to change the word from down to something else," because he associates down with this. So we use drop. I said, "Now, under the boot," all right? As soon as now he's going down in under a minute. Now I said, once he commits, tell him drop. Come back the third week. Now, he said, when I tell him drop, boom, down. I don't have my foot under the lead anymore, over the lead anymore. I said, now, just now, when you tell him drop, bring your hand down at the same time. No more problem. Simple, right? But the human doesn't want to do it that way. The human says, I got a stubborn dog here, and I have to push myself through that. No, you don't. You can work against your dog, or you can work with them. It's always better to work with them, and you have a lot less scar tissue. So, listen, if you would like a copy of my book, pick one up, and Judy and I will be at the desk here, and I hope you do. And I want to thank, from my heart, each and every one of you for coming tonight. I appreciate it more than you know. So, all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.